The helicopter hadn't flown in 15 years. Its engine coughed like an old smoker. The rotors groaned, smoke hissed from the cockpit like steam from a broken pipe. No one dared to touch it. A violent storm had trapped the entire town of Elkhorn Ridge. Roads collapsed, bridges vanished, cell towers down. The elderly, the sick, and children were stranded with no way out, and no one coming to save them. Search and rescue teams refused. Military support was hours away. The town was on the brink of disaster. Until she stepped forward. No uniform, no badge, just a young black woman with calm eyes and a voice like steel. "I'll fly it, if you let me." No one knew who she was. But within hours, the whole town would owe her their lives and never even learn her name. Studio Microphone, join Life Moral Tales as we uncover the unbelievable true story of a woman who walked into chaos and flew straight into legend. They said the storm would pass by morning, that the mountain had seen worse, that the town of Elkhorn Ridge would hold like it always did. They were wrong. On the fourth day of relentless rain, when the wind howled like a wounded animal and the power had been gone for 36 hours, the mountain gave in. With a roar like a freight train crashing into a cathedral, half of Ridgeway Road disappeared in a tide of mud, uprooted trees, and shattered concrete. The only bridge out was gone, swallowed by the torrent. The town was trapped. End time was running out. Elkhorn Ridge was a forgotten place, nestled high in the Appalachians of West Virginia, where internet was patchy and cell towers were more rumor than fact. The nearest hospital was 42 miles away, and now unreachable. The nearest airfield had been hit by a lightning strike the night before, destroying the radio tower. And yet, in the aftermath, amid toppled power lines and knee-deep mud, what terrified the residents wasn't what had already happened, it was what hadn't yet. Several homes were teetering on the edge of collapse. 3 children were missing. Dozens of elderly residents were stranded in the nursing home, with no generator, no heat, and rising water. The rescue team? Stuck behind landslides. State police? Unable to reach them. The National Guard? 2 hours away, if they could even land. Only one possible option remained. At the edge of the abandoned fire station sat an old Bell UH-1 Iroquois, a Huey. A relic from the 1980s, used once a year in town parades and long forgotten by anyone under 40. Its paint was chipped, the rotor blades covered in mildew, its seatbelts frayed, dashboard lights long dead. It was, quite literally, the last hope. But there was a catch. The Huey wasn't fly-by-wire, no GPS, no digital systems. It was fully mechanical, heavy as sin, and unforgiving. No one in the town's current emergency roster had flown anything like it. One pilot took a look and said, "It's a flying coffin." The others didn't even try. The mayor called it a museum piece. The police chief said, "We'd be sending someone to die." So the helicopter sat, while time and hope slipped away. Then, just before noon, a stranger walked into the emergency command center. She wasn't in uniform. She didn't carry a badge. And no one had ever seen her before. She was in her late 20s, African-American, tall, lean, with a military-style duffel slung over one shoulder and grease-stained gloves in her back pocket. She had the look of someone who didn't care much for small talk or fear. She didn't speak right away. She didn't have to. She walked up to the town engineer, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "I can fly it, if you let me." Silence. Then laughter. Nervous, dismissive. The fire chief asked for credentials. She handed over a folded document with the faded seal of the U.S. Marine Corps. Name, Alexis Monroe. Rank, former staff sergeant. Specialization, rotary wing mechanic and combat support pilot. Discharged honorably after an incident she didn't speak of. The room grew quiet. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Back to Alexis. She wasn't here for glory. She didn't ask for payment. She didn't even ask for help. She just wanted access to the helicopter. And 15 minutes to make it fly. What followed next would become legend, not because of the storm or the rescue or even the machine, but because one woman chose to do what everyone else feared. In the hours that followed, Alexis Monroe would face winds no machine should withstand, systems failing. Mid-air, a town's worth of desperate lives, and her own demons. This is not a story of miracles. It's a story of decision, of grit, and of a ghost pilot who vanished as quietly as she came. Rain still fell, but softer now, the kind that whispered over wreckage rather than screamed. Inside the temporary emergency hub, an old church gymnasium lit by backup lanterns and battery packs, tension rippled like static in the air. Everyone had a job. Everyone had a list. And none of it mattered if they couldn't get people out. Mayor Carla Wexler stood at a folding table covered in maps soaked with coffee and water. She hadn't slept in nearly 2 days. Her voice cracked as she barked out updates. We've got 73 confirmed stranded on the West Ridge. 12 need medical evac. The water's rising, and we've got no way in. The fire chief, Jerry Mason, paced in a figure 8, every step louder than the last. There's no point in fantasizing, he muttered. That bird's a relic. Even if we could get it running, it'd fall out of the sky the second it lifts. The mayor didn't answer. She just looked at the clock. Across the room, the helicopter, the rusted Bell UH-1 Huey, sat in full view through the broken glass windows of the firehouse hangar. It hadn't moved in 15 years. Its last inspection report had more red marks than a failing high school essay. Still, it was the only hope. 3 licensed pilots had come to see it. The first laughed and walked away. The second sat in the cockpit for 5 minutes, then came out shaking his head. The third said nothing, just left and never came back. They called Charleston, Beckley, even an airbase in Kentucky. No one could reach them in time. The roads were gone, the air was worse, and the rain kept machines grounded. And the Huey? She wasn't a machine anymore. She was a challenge, a dare. Wrench, what do you want me to do? Pray over it. By now, people were starting to break. Volunteers sat slumped against the walls, cradling radios that chirped static. Someone sobbed softly in the corner. Someone else whispered about a baby trapped near the river bend. In the thick of it all, a town mechanic named Leo raised his voice. What do you want me to do? Pray over it. That thing's got rotted fuel lines, a cracked manifold, and missing gauges. Alexis, quiet until now, approached the cockpit again. She didn't ask permission, she just climbed in. Dust puffed out like smoke from the seat cushions. The smell of old leather, rust, and oil filled the air. Her hands moved across the panel like she was reading Braille. She flipped switches, tapped gauges, pulled back a few covers, and then she smiled. Not because the helicopter was fine, but because it wasn't. Speech balloon, I know what's wrong with her. I can fix it. She climbed down and walked straight to Mayor Wexler. You've got half a tank of stabilized fuel in that drum behind the garage. The batteries are dead, but I can bypass them and jumpstart with a diesel inverter. The hydraulics are ancient, but the rotors are solid. I can give her pitch, torque, and lift. All I need is access and about 45 minutes. The room froze. The mayor blinked. You're telling me you can make it airworthy? Alexis didn't flinch. I'm not telling you. I'm doing it. Unless you'd prefer to wait and count body bags. No one said a word. The fire chief sighed, rubbed his face, and muttered, God help us all. Hammer and wrench. The rebuild begins. With nothing but a flashlight between her teeth and a wrench in her right hand, Alexis started to work. She didn't ask for help, but when Leo hesitated near the toolbox, she nodded. And just like that, the two became a team. Others joined in. The grocer's son held bolts. The retired welder helped reseal lines. A teenage girl ran back and forth carrying rags and duct tape. For the first time in 72 hours, the town didn't freeze. It moved. She instructed with precision. Zip tie that hose to the coolant line. Scrape the gunk off the tail rudder. That's not a crack. It's surface rust. Sand it. Paint it. She worked fast, like someone racing time. Not for glory, but for survival. Gear, it's not pretty, but it'll fly. At exactly 44 minutes in, Alexis stepped back and pulled the ignition switch. The engine coughed. Once. Twice. Then a roar, a sputter, a deep, throaty growl that echoed off the mountains. The blades started to spin. Not fast, not smooth, but alive. The town stood still. Even the fire chief whispered, "Son of a bitch." Alexis didn't smile. She simply walked toward the hangar, tightened the straps on her boots, and called over her shoulder. "Load the injured first. No more than 5 per run. I'm taking the canyon route. It's shorter, but riskier. Keep the rest ready." The mayor grabbed her arm. "Why are you doing this?" Alexis looked her in the eye. "Because if I don't, no one else will." And then, with the entire town watching, she climbed into a machine everyone else had given up on, and made it live again. The Huey lifted like a stubborn old bear, groaning, creaking, and fighting gravity with every bolt and rivet. Inside, the vibrations rattled Alexis's teeth. Her fingers clenched the cyclic and collective, guiding the beast over a landscape that looked nothing like it had before the storm. Floodwaters cut deep scars through familiar valleys. Roads became rivers. Tree lines turned into broken toothpicks. Behind her, 5 passengers sat strapped in with makeshift harnesses. A teenage boy with a compound leg fracture, a pregnant woman clutching her belly, a nurse in tears, and 2 elderly men who hadn't spoken since they boarded. "This is not going to be smooth," Alexis muttered under her breath. And it wasn't. Tornado rough air and radio silence. At 300 feet, the winds hit harder, sudden bursts of turbulence that shoved the Huey sideways like a plastic toy. Alexis gritted her teeth, adjusting pitch and tilt, fighting the wind with both arms locked like a wrestler in a death grip. Her headset crackled, barely audible. She reached for the radio dial, twisted it, tried to call the emergency base. "Elkhorn Base, this is Ghostbird 1. Do you read?" Static. She tried again. Nothing. "Of course," she muttered. "No radio, no nav, just me in the sky." Below, the hills were sliding. Literal earth was shifting beneath her. A sharp flash of lightning illuminated a mudslide carving through Ridgeway Bluff, the same area she was headed toward. "If we go down," she whispered, "we don't get back up." Compassed the wrong valley. The first route was blocked. The canyon pass had collapsed. Alexis veered west, low and fast, scanning with her eyes because there was no working navigation screen. She knew this range from the satellite maps she memorized, but now everything looked foreign. Then came the first jolt. The engine coughed. Not long, just enough to freeze her mid-breath. The torque gauge dipped. She pulled up slightly, adjusted collective. Felt the tail swing out wider than expected. "Not now. Come on, baby, hold it." The Huey lurched, then caught wind again, but the control felt spongy, like piloting through molasses. Something was wrong with the hydraulics. She could feel it in the left pedal, slacking, slow, like trying to steer a truck on ice. But there was no turning back. They were almost there. Derelict house, a place that shouldn't exist. Through the mist, she spotted it. A lone cabin half submerged in water, 3 people waving desperately with blankets. This wasn't the location from dispatch. She hovered. The wind whipped sideways, and the Huey began to yaw, rotating in place. Alexis braced. Too much wind, not enough counterforce. She dropped altitude fast, too fast, and hit skids against a rock ledge. "Brace!" she shouted behind her. Metal scraped earth. The Huey jolted violently. Someone screamed. Then stillness. Smoke. But not fire. Alexis breathed out, checked instruments. Everything in the red, but still turning. She swung the side door open. "1 minute! Let's go!" 2 townsfolk from the cabin splashed forward, carrying a boy between them, blood on his arm, eyes shut. Alexis jumped out, grabbed his legs, hauled him up into the Huey. The nurse inside took over. The pregnant woman sobbed. The teenage boy vomited from pain and fear. Time was melting. Alexis jumped back into the pilot's seat, looked up, saw it. The ledge above her was sliding. Collision escape from collapse. Without a word, she slammed collective, twisted the throttle, and pulled. The Huey dragged itself into the sky just as a ton of mud and rocks came crashing down onto where it had landed 10 seconds earlier. The sound was deafening. Chunks of shale bounced off the skids. One rock hit the tail, jolting the rear rotor. Alarms screamed, but they weren't real alarms, just blinking lights that had no diagnostic support. She had no way to tell if they meant danger or nonsense. "You're okay," she whispered to the bird. "You're ugly and old and pissed off, but you're okay." She turned. "Everyone good?" No one answered, but they were breathing. Airplane arrival, landing, and chaos. Alexis spotted the church parking lot in the distance, the designated landing zone. It was lit by 2 trucks with headlights pointed skyward, mud everywhere, barely room to drop. She came in low. Wind slapped the rotor again. The tail drifted, not responding fast enough. She countered, slipped, skids hit water, then bounced. "Come on, come on, come on!" She tapped collective, used her body weight like a pendulum, corrected manually, muscle memory from years long buried, and landed. Not clean, not elegant, but on the ground. People ran toward the Huey, medical teams, volunteers, reporters with cameras. Alexis didn't move. She stared forward for 5 full seconds, then flipped switches, killed the engine, removed her headset, then opened the side door. "Next 5, she said. Brain flashback, why she flies. As the new passengers boarded, her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, from memory. A desert airfield, a crash. Screams in the headset. And the silence that followed. That's where she had lost them, her unit, her name, herself. She had vowed never to fly again, never to trust a machine, a command, or a mission. But this wasn't a mission. This was choice. This was redemption on her own terms. Footprint preparing for round 2. As fuel was topped off and her bird was quickly patched with duct tape and zip ties, someone approached. "The mayor again." "Alexis, that was insane." She didn't reply. "You can stop. 1 run's enough. We'll find another way." She turned, stared her in the eye. "They're still up there, so no, it's not enough." And with that, she climbed in again. The door slammed, the blades turned. The Huey screamed back to life, and Alexis, the ghost pilot no one believed in, took off toward the mountains, into a second storm, without looking back. By the time Alexis took off for the second trip, the rain had returned. Not a downpour, but a misty, persistent spray that made everything look ghostly and uncertain. The Huey shuddered midair, her mechanics held together by temporary patches and faith. She could feel every vibration, every click that wasn't supposed to happen, every low-pitched whine from the tail rotor that meant it was holding, but just barely. "Okay, girl," Alexis murmured, patting the console. "Let's not get dramatic yet." Behind her this time were 4 passengers, a mother with 2 toddlers, and an older man who had dislocated his shoulder trying to dig out a neighbor. He grunted in pain with every bump. They were headed to the eastern ridge, where a family of 6 had been reported trapped in a house surrounded by a collapsing rock shelf. The flight path was narrower, steeper, and more dangerous than the last. And there was no backup plan. National Park flying into the teeth of the mountain. Alexis flew low, weaving between tree lines, over washed-out logging roads, and under power lines still sparking intermittently. Her hands worked instinctively, compensating for the Huey's age with muscle memory and raw grit. She checked the makeshift altimeter duct-taped in place. Still stable. Still flying. The radio crackled. "Ghostbird 1, Elkhorn Base, do you read?" She snatched the mic. "Copy, Elkhorn. You're late. Storm's shifting east. Radar shows landslide activity near Hollow Bend. You're flying into a red zone." Alexis didn't blink. "Noted." She clicked the radio off. "Warning, warning" signs. As she approached the ridge, she saw it, a massive rock face, slick with mud, glistening under the muted gray light. The house sat directly below it, a single-level cabin with smoke coming from a damaged chimney. The porch had collapsed. A blue tarp waved like a desperate flag. People were outside, waving. A man pointed up the ridge. Alexis followed his gesture and froze. The upper ridge was moving. It started slow, small stones tumbling, a crack widening along the slope. She had maybe 2 minutes, maybe less. "Okay," she whispered. "We don't land, we hover." Stop sign, no room to land. The ground was soaked and sloped. Landing would be suicide. Alexis brought the Huey in, side-angled, doors open. The mother behind her gasped as they skimmed just 10 feet above the treetops. Alexis held position manually. No auto-hover, no assists, just biceps, brain, and adrenaline. One by one, the trapped family scrambled onto the porch roof. The father slung his daughter into the open door where the nurse caught her. Alexis screamed over the rotor. "Two at a time! Move!" Wind kicked up debris, dust, and fear. Collision, the mountain falls. Then it happened. A thunderous crack echoed across the valley. The upper ledge gave way. A wall of dirt, rock, and broken trees began sliding down, fast. Alexis had seconds. "Hold on," she yelled. She yanked collective. The Huey lunged upward. Not fast enough. Chunks of earth smacked the undercarriage. A rock shattered the tail boom's lower panel. The Huey tipped, dangerously, like a spinning top. She corrected with brute strength. The kids screamed. The older man cried out in pain. Then, silence. They were airborne again. The ledge below was gone, buried. The house? Crushed. If she had waited another 30 seconds, everyone would have died. Wrench engine in trouble. Alarms blared. Not warning lights, just grinding sounds no pilot wants to hear. Torque was dropping. The engine temperature was rising. Alexis clenched her jaw. The duct-taped patch near the left intake had failed. She could smell burning oil. She could feel drag on the rotors. They weren't going to make it back the same way. "Keem on, old girl," she whispered. "Don't you quit on me now." Mountain the canyon gamble. Instead of turning back toward Elkhorn Ridge, she took a detour, a dry riverbed cutting through 2 narrow canyon walls. It was tighter, riskier, but shorter, 5 miles less than the return route. She angled down, banking sharp. The Huey's blades barely missed the canyon edges. Sparks flew as one rotor clipped a stone outcrop. The tail swung. Alexis corrected. Breath held. The kids were crying now. The older man muttered prayers. One slip, just one, and they'd be splattered across rock like insects on glass. But Alexis didn't flinch. Airplane arrival back home, barely. The canyon opened. Elkhorn's landing zone came into view. Headlights and people, still waiting, still hoping. Alexis brought the Huey in, with a side-slip approach. One of the riskiest maneuvers a pilot could, the tempt in a crippled bird. The tail dipped. She twisted, corrected. The skids hit mud, slid, held. Landed. Cheers broke out. People ran forward. Alexis didn't move for 10 seconds. She just sat, hands gripping controls, staring straight ahead. Then she whispered, 2 runs down, still breathing. She unbuckled, opened the door, and before the medics could ask anything, she said, "Fuel her, patch her, I'm going back." Fire, the legend grows. By now, townspeople were calling her the Ghost, kids pointed, reporters scribbled. But Alexis didn't care. The mountain had tried to kill her. She survived. And others did too. But there were still more waiting. She didn't come here to be remembered. She came to finish what no one else would dare start. The 3rd run should have been the last. Not by plan, but by every single sign the universe could give. The Huey was tired. Alexis could feel it in her bones. The way a mechanic knows the whimper of a failing engine, the way a mother knows her child's cry. She'd already pulled 2 miracles from the sky. But this time felt different. Stopwatch, a race against darkness. Night was falling. The valley was now pitch black, save for distant flashlight beams flickering like fireflies. Battery power was scarce. The town's emergency floodlights were dying one by one. Her next stop? A campsite near the upper logging trail where 7 hikers had been trapped since the storm began. No cell service. 1 flare spotted 3 hours ago. Nothing since. One more run, Alexis told herself. One more, and we're done. She didn't believe it. But she said it anyway. The pre-flight warning. Mechanic Leo tried to stop her. "Alexis, listen to me. The left yaw actuator's barely hanging on. The main shaft's rattling harder than a gambler in Vegas. If that bird was a car, we wouldn't let it off the lot." Alexis checked the panel. A new crack had formed in the hydraulic line casing. Her hands shook slightly. "So patch it, duct it, whatever it takes. You're gonna die up there." "Yeah?" she snapped. "So will they if I don't go." Leo didn't argue. He just handed her the wrench. Silently, they went to work. Airplane departure, the takeoff that nearly didn't happen. As she throttled up, the Huey gave its most violent protest yet. A shriek, a sputter, and a cough that made every mechanic flinch. But it lifted. Barely. The vibrations were brutal. The tail swung inconsistently. The warning light for main rotor speed flickered, then died completely. Alexis flew anyway. "You don't stop until it stops," she muttered. Fog lost in the clouds. 15 minutes in, fog rolled in, thicker than soup. Visibility dropped to 30 feet. Trees became shadows. Rocks became illusions. She couldn't see the campsite. Couldn't hear them. Could barely even see her own instrument panel. She switched to manual orientation. No GPS. No sensors. Just memory and math. That's when the engine started knocking. The noise wasn't rhythmic. It was chaotic. Metallic banging from deep inside the turbine housing. She adjusted torque. Nothing changed. "No, no, no." The Huey tilted. She corrected. Slower now. Every correction was like dragging a train uphill. Downward trend, free fall. 400 feet in 3 seconds. Suddenly, the left rotor lost power. The tail dipped. The Huey dropped 400 feet in a sickening dive. The passengers screamed. Alexis's vision blurred. The windows fogged over. The seatbelt strap dug into her shoulder. At the last possible moment, she slammed collective, twisted the cyclic, and leveled 25 feet above the treetops. The tail scraped a branch. Sparks! Smoke! A branch tore through the belly panel. But they didn't crash. Somehow, they didn't crash. Compass, the last hopes. Then, a flash. A flare. She spotted it between the trees, a red glow, burning bright from a clearing up ahead. The campers were still alive. But there was no way to land. So she did the impossible. She hovered at an incline, side door open, as the hikers scrambled up a muddy slope to reach her. The nurse inside pulled them in one by one. The last was a man in his 60s with a broken leg. Alexis waited 90 seconds, every rotor shaking like a ticking time bomb. "One more," she whispered. "One more." Then they were in. She slammed throttle and pulled away as the last flare sputtered and died. Revolving light critical failure. On the way back, the Huey finally hit its limit. The main rotor dropped 200 RPM, torque gauge flatlined. Oil pressure tanked. Alarms shrieked. Real ones this time. Fire warnings on the left side. Smoke filled the cabin. Alexis couldn't breathe. She grabbed her scarf, tied it around her face, and yelled, "Everybody down! Heads between knees! Hold on!" The landing site was nowhere in sight. She had 45 seconds of airtime, maybe less. Then, a miracle. The school football field! Wide open! No lights, all mud. She dropped altitude, skipped over the treetops, came in hot and crooked. Skids hit the ground. Hard! The Huey bounced, slammed down again, skidded sideways, then stopped. Steam, sparks, silence. She had landed, silence and survival. Alexis didn't move, neither did the passengers. Then, slowly, people started crawling out. One of the teenagers hugged the ground, sobbing. Another kissed her hand. The nurse threw up from adrenaline. Alexis pulled herself out last, limping, coughing, covered in soot. Someone handed her water. She shook her head. "Fix it," she said hoarsely. "I'm not done." Leo stepped forward, eyes wide. "You are now. That bird's dead." She looked at the Huey, cracked frame, smoking engine, rotor bent. He was right. She had pushed it one run too far. The Huey was dead. Its blade still slowly turned, more out of inertia than power, and smoke curled from under the housing like a defeated breath. It had done more than anyone expected, more than it should have. But now, it was over. And yet, the mission wasn't. There were still 12 people trapped in the North Basin, a family of 5. 2 schoolteachers, an elderly couple, and a 10-year-old girl named Mia, whose asthma was worsening by the hour. Alexis stood on the field, staring at the broken helicopter like a soldier looking at a fallen comrade. Her hair was soaked with sweat and rain. Her face, streaked with engine grease and ash. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion too deep for words. "You did good," she whispered to the machine. "You did more than good." Then she turned to the crowd. Pedestrian, the moment of choice. People had gathered, townsfolk, medics, firefighters, even kids holding flashlights. The ones she'd already saved stood closest, eyes wide, faces pale, many still shaking. Mayor Carla stepped forward. "There's no more air support coming," she said quietly. "We tried. No choppers. No drones. Nothing in or out for at least 12 more hours." Alexis didn't respond. Carla continued. "We've got 2 ATVs, 1 Jeep barely runs, and a dozen pairs of boots." She looked out at the crowd. "We don't have a pilot anymore, but we've got someone who knows the terrain, who's risked everything already." All eyes turned to Alexis. She shook her head. "We don't have time for a speech." "No," Carla said. "We have time for a choice." Silence. Then Alexis took 1 step forward. "Who here can still walk 6 miles in the mud?" Hands rose. 5, then 10, then 20. Hiking boot, the human chain begins. Within 15 minutes, they were moving. A ragtag caravan of farmers, teenagers, a nurse with a sprained ankle, a retired ranger, a preacher with a flashlight, and a girl with blue-dyed hair who didn't speak, just carried an oxygen tank like it was her own. Alexis led them up the old logging trail, through knee-high water and shoulder-high brambles. Every step was a grind. Every movement tested willpower more than strength. "This isn't a rescue mission," she told them. "It's a relay." They moved in shifts, forming a chain of care, carrying blankets, water, inhalers, and hope. One group went ahead. Another stayed back to build a fire near the pickup zone. Others followed with supplies from the church and school kitchen. It was no longer about machines. It was about people, the candle in the dark. 3 hours in, they reached the northern basin. The air smelled like pine and wet rock. The campsite had partially collapsed, but the people were alive. Cold, hungry, but alive. When they saw Alexis, one of the teachers burst into tears. The child Mia clutched her oxygen mask. "Are you an angel?" she asked. Alexis knelt beside her. "No, baby. I'm just the one who didn't say no." The human chain began its work, wrapping the elderly in ponchos, giving glucose tabs to the diabetic man, hot cider to the schoolteacher. It wasn't fast. It wasn't clean. But it worked. Fire the walk back, in shifts and shadows. They returned in waves. 2 people carried at a time. Others led slowly arm in arm. The fog had thickened. Visibility was down to 10 feet. Alexis led the last wave, with Mia asleep in her arms, the oxygen tank strapped to her back with a dog leash they'd found in someone's backpack. Her legs ached with every step. Her knees buckled twice, but she didn't stop. Behind her, someone started singing a hymn. Others joined. The sound rose through the woods like a protest or a prayer. And when the church lights of Elkhorn Ridge came back into view, dim, flickering, but there, Alexis almost collapsed. But she kept walking. Party popper arrival. A.N.D. a different kind of landing. They crossed the field at dawn. People poured out of buildings to meet them. Someone dropped to their knees. Someone else whispered, "She brought them all." The girl with blue hair threw her arms around Alexis and said, "You shouldn't have done this alone." Alexis finally spoke. "I didn't." The people had become the rescue. She had lit the spark, but they carried the flame. Camera, the photo that went viral. Someone snapped a photo. Alexis, standing in the mist, soaked, holding a sleeping child, framed by tired faces, muddy boots, and rising sunlight. It would go viral the next day. It would be called The Day a Town Learned to Fly. But Alexis never saw it. Because she was already gone. She didn't want a press conference. Didn't want the cameras. Didn't want a parade. Didn't even want a thank you. So when the last patient was moved, when the final fire was doused, and when the town of Elkhorn Ridge finally took its first breath in 4 days, Alexis was already packing her duffel bag. Luggage the leaving. It was 6:15 a.m. No one else was awake, except the nurse with the sprained ankle. She sat near the school gym door, sipping coffee from a cracked mug. "You're just gonna disappear?" she asked. Alexis zipped up her jacket. "I was never supposed to be here. You saved 42 people. I fixed a helicopter. The rest? That was all of you." The nurse shook her head, grinning softly. "No one else would have started it." Alexis didn't answer. She just nodded and walked outside. Hammer and wrenched the toolbox she left behind. In the firehouse, where the Huey still sat like a burned-out dragon, Alexis left her flight gloves on the seat. On the toolbox, she taped a note. "Replace the manifold, reseal the intake. She's got one more flight left, if someone has the guts." It wasn't a goodbye. It was a challenge. Speech balloon, the final conversation. Mayor Carla caught her at the edge of town, just as Alexis was stepping onto the back of a supply truck headed west. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Anywhere that's not here. People are asking about you. National press, state governor's office. They want your name. Then tell them I don't do names. You could stay, we'd find a job, you could train people, build a flight program." Alexis looked away, eyes fixed on the tree line. "I wasn't meant to be a face. I'm a shadow. Shadows don't stay." The mayor handed her something wrapped in cloth. A piece of rotor blade from the Huey, engraved with the words, "When no one else would, she did." Alexis touched it once, then handed it back. "Keep it. That's your story now." And then she climbed aboard and was gone before the sun broke over the ridge. TV, the aftermath. News spread like wildfire. Someone leaked her name. Someone posted the photo, the girl in the mist with the child. Someone else tracked her military records, Marine Corps. Mechanic. Flight support. Honorable discharge after a scandal no one wanted to talk about. By the time national media reached Elkhorn Ridge, she was already 3 states away. When they asked the townspeople about her, all they said was, "She showed up, she flew, she disappeared." She became a myth before the week ended, the tribute. At the center of Elkhorn Ridge, right next to the rebuilt firehouse, they carved a statue, not from stone, but from a single piece of pine salvaged from the forest. It wasn't detailed, wasn't polished. Just a silhouette of a woman, hair in the wind, standing beside a rotor blade leaning in the dirt. At the base, 4 words. For the one, WHO flew. People left notes. Kids tied bandanas around the statue's wrist. Veterans saluted when they passed. And no one tried to replace her, because you can't replace a ghost. Thought balloon, the legend lives. Over the years, stories grew. They said she was CIA. They said she was a pilot who lost her whole unit in Afghanistan. Others swore they saw her fixing an engine in a Texas border town. One claimed she saved a family during a California wildfire, then vanished again. No one ever proved any of it. But no one ever stopped telling the stories either, because in a world that worships heroes for likes and headlines, Alexis Monroe was something rarer. A woman who acted and never asked for credit. A reminder that the greatest power isn't flying a machine through a storm. It's choosing to go where no one else will. In a world obsessed with recognition, she asked for none. In a town frozen by fear, she moved. Not because she was fearless, but because no one else would. Alexis Monroe's story isn't just about flying a broken helicopter through a storm. It's about the power of silent courage. The kind that doesn't scream or demand a headline, but shows up when it matters most. She didn't have backup. She didn't wait for approval. She didn't post it on social media. She just acted. What would the world look like if more people chose to act, not for attention, but because it was right? Sometimes the greatest leadership comes from those who walk away after the work is done. Sometimes, the loudest voice is the one that never needed to speak. This story reminds us, Sha. Heroism isn't about medals. Sha. Sacrifice doesn't always get applause. Sha. And real strength? It's often invisible until everything else has failed. Sha. Wherever she is now, Alexis left behind more than a town she saved. She left a question for all of us. When the moment comes, will you wait for someone else, or will you step forward? If this story moved you, even just a little, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video so more people discover it. Leave a comment. What would you have done in Alexis's place? Share this with someone who believes in quiet heroes. And most importantly, subscribe to Auto Cinema, because next week's story will take you to the edge of the Alaskan wilderness and into a decision that changed a town forever. We want to hear from you. Do you believe there are still people like Alexis in the world today? Have you ever witnessed someone step up when no one else would? Your thoughts, your stories, they matter. This channel isn't just about storytelling. It's about remembering that courage, sacrifice, and grit are still out there, even if they don't make headlines. You just watched The Woman Who Flew When No One Else Would. Up next, the stranger who walked into a burning town and stayed. We'll see you there.